Hello, thank you for joining us again. This is episode 3 of the Elevate program, and this is going to be on robotics. We're going to emphasize UAS, specifically human machine teaming and autonomy. And the Elevate program is enhancing leaders electronically and virtually with adaptive technologies in education. And today we have a special guest, Jacob McLeod, and we would like for him to be able to talk about his background, 20 years plus, retired Naval Chief Petty Officer, UAS subject matter expert for the Naval Special Warfare Command. And he has an immense passion to help out cadets, and I'll let him talk about a little bit more about his current background, or his background and his current passions and what he's working on. Jacob, how are you, buddy?
Great, Jordan. Thanks. Appreciate that intro. Yeah, a little bit about myself. So I graduated out of high school in '99. I wasn't a great kid. Had a little bit of problems, stayed in trouble. Then I figured the best opportunity for me and the most mature thing for me to do is go in the military. College just wasn't in my sight at that time. So I joined the Navy because my dad was a Navy man. I really liked aviation as a child. I always liked airplanes and especially helicopters. And I landed in the helicopter community straight out of boot camp. So really my background and my original learning in the Navy was electronics technician, aviation side type. So I worked on the 60 helicopter for almost half my career, about 9.5 years or so, multiple squadrons deploying all over the world, supporting that and repairing helicopters. It was a great career, passionate about it. The challenges were there when I need them. Sometimes they weren't. So when I had an opportunity of a peer of mine, they reached out and they asked if I'd be interested in applying for a program. It's kind of a new program at the time. It had a couple of years under its belt. And it was basically an unmanned aviation systems squadron type intelligence command that they had started up, and it's up and running, and they wanted to grow the UAV or UAS troop or platoon at the time. So I thought that was really interesting. It sounded like a great challenge. So I applied, screened in for that program and got accepted. And next thing you know, I'm supporting SEAL teams all over the world, flying multiple aircrafts, air environment products, some other smaller company products, in situ, scan eagles and whatnot. And that really kind of blossomed into an operator individual role where I go out and support SEAL teams to something greater beyond myself. And that vision of, serving countries, serving other people, serving young people, as a chief petty officer, and then later on as a senior chief petty officer. And what I really grew to love and really where my passion is at is really mentoring and leading young people and bringing influence in their lives that's positive and helping them, steer and give them some guiding light. So I think out of my whole military career, all the amazing experiences and the places I've gone, the things I've got to experience and the opportunities provided me, influence and working with some great young people was probably my most significant impact personally on myself. So I did that for a while, leadership, across the world, leading large troops of people, multiple sites, flying UAVs, supporting the effort on the global war of terrorism. And I ended up right before I retired working for Naval Special Warfare, which influenced the acquisition process and being a subject matter expert for UAVs, and therefore influence also SOCOM. And I had some influence in writing some programs of records and whatnot, influencing those. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. So retired January last year. So I'm now on the other side, on the industry side, trying to do the same thing, trying to give some strategic planning towards products on the other side.
Awesome. Well, I know that you mentioned working with the SEAL teams and then also on the acquisition side, which is a really unique, being able to do the operator and be able to help try to drive acquisitions to help the operator. We like to think of it as opposed to acquisition-driven operations, that we should have operator-driven acquisitions. And there's several different people who's agreed with us on that. With regards to like Mosaic warfare, we know UAS play a large role in being able to hyper-enable an operator. And having a hyper-enabled operator means that you have a leaner, faster, more lethal force. Would you like to elaborate a little bit on UAS and how that plays a role in lethality?
Absolutely. So, it's really about shortening the kill chain. If you want to get into the dirty details of war, it's effects on target. So that's how you win wars. You affect the battle space. Where that be is physical terrain, that's an information technology battle space. It's the effect on your battle space, and that's what counts. If you're not getting closer faster or more effective to that goal, then you're in the wrong direction. You need to re-steer. Somebody needs to get a hold of the ship and put it back on course. It's all about effects on the battle space, and you'll see that a lot culturally within the military. Is either you have older generations that do it because that's the way they used to do it and that's what they're brought up doing it, or you have people who are younger generationally and they chase rabbits because it's great technology, and nonetheless it is very great technology, but maybe it doesn't have the effects on battlefields that's actually worth the investment, the time and hours on it. So UAS on the battlefield really shortens that kill chain. It speeds up the process. So you have things like finite greater effects on your targets. So more validation, more positive identification, more persistence in the air and or ground, and then actually being able to validate and then do a joint, either it's a human teaming effort for a strike, or you do a full autonomous lead on to strike, and prosecute targets. So I think that's the most significant impact, is effects on battlefield and shorten the kill chain, timeline, and being finite for your targets.
Absolutely. So like just being able to have that scalability to an individual hyper-enabled operator leans out the total number of casualties, because you have a faster, more lethal force. So therefore each individual operator gets more done. So you can have smaller forces that have the impact of brigade level, and that's a big deal on being able to alleviate some of those casualties on the battlefield also. So with that, you would have some things that are autonomous, some swarm, some one-on-one capabilities with those robotics. So having that crossover with the hyper-enabled operator is important. What would you like to talk about with regards to how autonomy or semi-autonomous capabilities can assess or can help supplement hyper-enabled operators?
So autonomy and the hyper-enabled operator. So there's a lot of stigma around hyper-enabled operator. Some tribes will think that you enhance the human. Some tribes need to think you need to enhance what he wears, and some think you need to enhance what flies and moves around him. And what I think the most pivotal, the most important part about the hyper-enabled operator is that network. What is his technical battlefield tactical network? And how do those things that you want to apply to that operator, how do they interact with him? And what's the seamless transition from, I'm looking at a target, I'm visually calculating in my mind a 9-line, maybe to prosecute a target, versus I visually look at it and use technologies like AR and VR overlays. I'm creating digital 9-lines instead of thinking, doing math, writing things down, and communicating with voice, and it's all passed up digitally. So there's kind of some examples. You can't get to that focus point without the technological network around that hyper-enabled operator. And that comes really down to the end user devices that are on the operator versus how they interact with the waveforms, the RF, and how's that scaled up? What does your operational bubble look like? And what's the resiliency versus, how hardened is that? Mm-hmm. So that's really things that the military has to get behind.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And so being able to have the JADC2, the Joint All-Domain Command and Control capabilities that really turn into Mosaic warfare. I know that DARPA, Dr. Tim Grayson said, we want to bring the same flexibility and adaptability of complex systems to the warfighter that artists have creating Mosaic works of art, as he was describing the Mosaic warfare. And I feel like that some of those pieces for the Mosaic are the UAS, are the hyper-enabled operators that have assets off of them, and being able to flex and mold for the battlefield as necessary, being able to ramp up or scale down on what you're actually activating with the hyper-enabled operator. So that HEO then can effectively do more, so you lean out the total overhead of the operation, plus you reduce the casualties of close combat close combat casualties.
Absolutely. And it's really about, if the military's focus is truly on hyper enabling, and then also focus on AI, swarming, Mosaic technologies, enhancing the battlefield, the goal should really be to eliminate people off the battlefield as much as possible. Now, granted, you'll never get rid of human elements on the battlefield. There are going to be, no matter what, some soft conventional forces that have to have a presence on the battlefield. But we have these technologies not only to be more lethal, have more effects, but it also, like you said, it removes personnel from the battlefield, and that, that saves lives. But it also makes the very few that are on the battlefield, the aim point should be for them to be more effective. So hyper enabled. So one is 100, 100 is 1,000. That should be the real goal. Yeah, totally agree with
Absolutely.
that.
Yeah, force of magnitudes higher. How do you feel about like to me this seems like if you implement it correctly, you're going to be able to speed up the OODA loop and like you said, reduce the kill chain timeline. How do you think that you can effectively do that maybe in the next 5 years or so, depending on bureaucratic adoption?
Yeah, that's a that's a stake in the ground. The politics and bureaucracy behind it. It comes down to RF. So how are you going to propagate data? What's going to be that waveform? Especially in access, near peer competitive powers, access denied areas of operation. How are you going to go in there with a waveform that's simplistic? For everyone to use, it needs to be on the battlefield. That also talks on CDL, common data links to aircraft and UAVs, and how we link that up. Let's bring Space Force in the picture. So if you start talking about what Space Force really could be with really thought leadership behind it, it's pretty amazing. So I
Absolutely.
really think what the Department of Defense, they need to get behind their RF. They need to figure out their frequency bands. They need to figure out how they process, disseminate data, how they exploit data retrieved, and how they can harden that. And that's our most difficult. That's the closest gator to the boat. I would say, like, you need to figure out how you're going to get that data over the air.
Yes, and make sure it's secure, and the providers are secure, and the supply chain is secure, and CMMC levels and zero trust and things of that nature being able to be applied.
Commonality. Have everybody play on the same sheet of music too. That's been an issue a lot.
Yes, on the recent STEM deficit, that well, it's not even really so much recent. It's been over the last few decades, but it's been brought to the forefront by the Pentagon, talking about how that's a national security risk. I feel that this Elevate program can help alleviate some of that by driving, the STEM related students, the ROTC together, bringing in emerging technologies, bringing capability gaps to the table, and trying to get some mind share around that. Would you like to be able to elaborate on how you feel about the STEM deficit being a problem?
Yeah, so investment in nations' future leaders um, is an issue. It's a problem. Um, in reality, if you go to the military and you experience that process of young leaders, you really don't have a battlefield or operationally hardened young officer until their sixth, seventh, eighth year actually serving. So the further and faster we can move up that timeline and educate, not only educate but also stimulate through STEM, and then also broaden their cultural, their eyesight, their point of view on what the military expects of them, and what they should expect of the military as well. Because I really believe this next generation is going to be pivotal on really developing our nation's military into the future for the next 30 to 50 years. We're really at this amazing point generationally of technology and how it's really going to leap forward on what the human effects can be versus technology effects in the battlefield. And if our young officers don't understand that, we're going to fail against our competitors, our powers of competition. So I think it's one of our greatest obstacles that we have to really support. So STEM's huge. Our young future leaders are huge. We need more investment. Absolutely.
Yes, I think that this is going to be critical, especially like General Milley mentioned, like we don't want it, but if a big power conflict were to happen, that would be a major necessity, similar to manufacturing in World War II. Not being able to be caught up on STEM and cyber and things of that nature would be a similar Achilles heel. Before we go to the leadership stuff, I was talking earlier about how acquisition-driven operations seems to be less efficient and less effective than operator-driven acquisition. And you throw industry into that, and industry seems to be on the operator side of being like, tell me your problem. We want to solve your problem, not what the written requirement is from the person in acquisitions or that chain process. How do you think that that should be navigated going forward? I know the DoD is doing a lot to alleviate on that particular issue.
That's really what that comes down to, Jordan. Honestly, that's a grassroots problem with your DoD components, your Navy, Marine Corps, your Air Force, your Space Force. That's a grassroots problem that's only going to be solved by our young JOs who are going to be future COs, commanders, generals in the future. And what it really comes down to is when it comes to military acquisition, putting the right people in the right place to influence change. And that's going to be your subject matter experts. That's going to be your old crusty senior chiefs, your old crusty gunny sergeants. It's going to be those people who've been out there and they've done it. You bring them in and you apply that practicalness, that wisdom down to the acquisition level and give it common sense and have them assess it. And we like the joke. I went to acquisitions for my twilight period retire, and that was not a position that anybody wanted to go. And I actually fought to get a position, a bill open for me to go there, because what I had discovered at an Echelon 4 command, I had no influence or change over what I saw was wrong with the battlefield. I was like, I see things, I'm deploying, and people could die because of this, or they are dying because of this. We can change this. I had no influence. I had no power to steer the ship. Next echelon up, it wasn't very influential either. So I struggled and I battled, and I finally got a position where I could go in and I could make influence and change. I feel like I could have some kind of effect on the battlefield and the acquisition process to make smart decisions that those young warfighters go out and use the right equipment for the right job to make the right effect. And I think it's really making space for that, really invested in STEM, and then taking those old sailors, Marines, soldiers, and educating those people on STEM technologies and why it makes a difference, because culturally you can battle that too. So that's a challenge for young officers in the future. They're going to see old guys like me stuck in their ways, and they got to get ahead of that. And there's only one way around. It's through education, being knowledgeable. It's not about my way or the highway.
So, no, that's a very good point. That means that this Elevate program probably needs to, I guess when it says enhancing leaders, maybe it needs to come from both ends. As far as leadership and takeaways for the cadets, I want them to learn from you. You're a very successful, officer in the Navy. Not only that, but being able to take your skill set that you acquired and applied for national security into your next stage in life. So can you give some leaderships and some takeaways to the cadets on what they should be focused on now in their position in school, and how that can apply in the next, not just their career for the military, but how that transitions later in life?
Yeah, I mean, there's a big difference between learning something in academia and actually being in a field you're operating, you're working in, you're leading in. So them in that stage of learning, they should be hungry for what's next. Obviously expand that STEM, obviously expand your passion and kind of thrive on that. The best thing to do is educate yourself, but also go out and I believe in culture. I think culture drives a lot more things. You can be educated a lot of times. You can't influence change without culture. And sometimes culture requires a couple of things. So find out what your culture is. What's your tribe? Where are you going? Do you want to go in submarines? Do you want to be in the Air Force? Do you want to go Space Force? Find your culture. So that'd be the number one step I'd say, is find your culture. Find out where you want to be. If your first year, second year, you don't know yet, that's fine. Start exploring, and then find a mentor. Mentor is number one. I'd recommend finding some old crusty officer or some old crusty enlisted person, or maybe somebody's just kind of in the middle pack. Find that person and learn your culture, and then try and hang on to that mentor and expand. Maybe that's not what you expect. Maybe you want to do something different or find a different mentor, but don't just get stuck in the books. They're important, but also get behind that culture and figure out your path. What's next? Always, find a job, fill it. That's what we say in the military. So find your next job, fill it, get ahead of it.
No, that's awesome. So I heard like being hungry for what's next. That stood out. That's a big one. And finding a mentor, someone that you can learn from, look up to, and ultimately try to take what's currently happened, because this particular evolution and innovation that's happening is paradigm shifting. So if you can learn from the best with regards to leadership and apply the new technologies, you're going to be light years ahead of many people. And then in the end, expand and adapt. I think those were the very good points. Is there anything else that you would like to hit on around UAS before I introduce the next episode and we wrap it up today?
I think the gravitation in UAS right now is sensationalized through commercial products. I work in the commercial and the industrial, and I work in the DoD market on the outside now. Do not get wrapped around the axle of sensationalized and dramatics of what's on the commercial market. It's not truth to reality in the military. So just avoid that disappointment. There's things, what happens when the military touches it, it changes a lot of things. There's red tape, there's cybersecurity, there's all kinds of issues, authority to operate that affect UAVs. So I think the biggest takeaway is there's a big difference between what's out there right now commercially that you can go buy at Best Buy, DJI, Chinese products. That's a whole nother market space, another conversation to talk about. But you need to know and discern the differences of those, and what's a political difference, and what's the impact on your country and your warfighters. So understand that, and then make fair assessments of technologies as you're exploring those technologies, but explore them all for sure.
Yeah. Supply chain is a very big deal, especially internal parts, which is obviously a focus for ITAR compliance and the DoD and their new guidelines around those particular supply chains. So very good points that you brought up there. And I do feel that UAS and all of this stuff is in its infancy. And so if we think about late 1800s, early 1900s, in the beginning of and in the middle of some of the Industrial Revolution, we're right there. So as people learn about what can happen, push on what's possible. So it will be an in-depth view in autonomy with former Chief of Robotics Development and Lethality for the Army, 20-year plus veteran Matthew Dooley, super great guy, and a president of the NMAC, which is the National Advanced Mobility Consortium. Thank you for being on, Jacob, and we greatly appreciate you. Any last words before we leave?
Nope. Stay hungry. Look for the next spot. If you need a mentor, let me know.
Awesome. Yeah. If you'd like to get with him, I know that LinkedIn is a really good access point. I'll put that in the description, and follow us on LinkedIn as well. We put a lot of great content on there as far as sharing some of the latest and greatest emerging technologies. Have a good day, and thank you very much.
Thanks, Jordan.